So Jack, how did you become a great leader? Did you have someone leading you?
First off, great leader is a misnomer. You learn tactics and techniques over time because you work for good people or you work for bad people. In my first 10 or 12 years, 2/3 of the people I worked were bad people. That's where I learned the principle that you never know how much authority you have until you exceed it. Because I can remember as a young company commander in the Asheville Valley area, we were told to go in because there was an NVA regiment there. I had a 215-man company and they wanted me to attack a 800-man dug-in NVA regiment. I was supposed to go from A to B and be there in 4 hours, and I couldn't get there. And this guy who was an Army colonel was flying around in a helicopter over where I was, and he was constantly yelling in his phone. And I had an old first sergeant who was a World War II Marine. He walked over and turned the radio off and said, "Captain, you figure out what you have to do." So from then on, every time I got somebody who flew over me with a stupid idea, I'd turn the radio off and say, "I can't hear you." And I would do what I wanted. And so you then learn kind of what you can get away with. But if you keep people as a focus, and in the Marine Corps, when you're leading people, people are your strategic asset. People are an incredibly important asset that you need to nurture and you need to grow. And that's true in every organization, whether it's Bechtel, SABIC, or whatever have you. The most important commodity you have are your people. And if you don't invest your time and energy in them, not the company's time, your time and your energy, then you start becoming a manager and not leader.
Great.
Good. When I went to work for Jack, he said, "Okay, if you hit the fence, I'll tell you. Yeah, if you get close to the fence, I'll tell you." And he said, "I don't really want you asking for permission, but it's okay to ask for forgiveness," which is kind of a similar message. And it didn't feel. Some of you may have had the impression that it feels intimidating, and it didn't feel intimidating at all. And you know, just going back to what I said about strong and caring, somehow an environment is created where you feel confident and everything feels clear, and you're very sure about what you're doing. And it didn't take me very long to make a big mistake. And he came to see me and he said, "Yeah, you've gone right through the fence." But it still didn't feel intimidating. Do you see the strong and caring leader is the one that doesn't make you feel bad about yourself? But we had a discussion about what I might do to kind of put things right and stuff, and I've definitely felt very clear about that as well. But I think that's the point. The point is what makes that happen is the trust that's developed by the skilled leader. If you don't like the term great leader, there are skilled leaders out there. And 2 leaders before Jack was a guy called Dudley Wood, and I was in an office in England and he was in an office in somewhere in America. And every 2 or 3 days he'd phone me up very early in the morning and say, "Hey, are you there?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And he'd say, "You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Goodbye," and put the phone down. And he must have spent, 20 seconds with me every 2 or 3 days. And I felt as if this guy was there for me all the time. It's just a really skillful thing to do. It was imaginative and it was skillful. And it was as if he was reading the things off the calendar on his desk. But it definitely made me feel confident that I could phone him up. And when I phoned him up, I definitely got very well received. So here was a guy that knew that we weren't going to meet face to face very often at all, but still made me feel as if I was part of the team by these frequent and often but very short phone calls.
Great. Okay, here's a question for both of you. How does someone like you get feedback on what you do?
You do it by little things, by going to the dining facility, mess hall, just sitting down with a group of people and asking them what you think. Young 19-year-old kids, whether they're Russian, Kazakhs, Americans, Brits, will tell you what's on their mind. They have nothing to lose. What you have to be fearful of is your staff, because they'll tell you what you want to hear. So one of the ways you guard against that is you hire people who are smarter than you are. First off, it's a great succession planning tool, but more important than that, having a group of people who are smarter than you are, and you tell them that they're smarter than you are, they have a tendency to kind of try to prove it to you all the time. And so invariably, if you come up with a stupid idea, they're the first ones to tell you. So you can't hire people who are sycophants. And there are a lot of, you avoid those kinds of people. Hire people who are smart, hire people who know what they stand for, and keep telling them that their value is only as good as in the input that they provide. But you also need loyalty too, because once the group has made a decision, the direction you're going to go in, end the conversation. Get on the train.
Great. So, Jack, what do businesses do that military would never do?
The one thing that is good and bad about the commercial world is profit and loss orientation. If you're a P&L principal, the profit and loss of your business line is very good because it has a tendency to drive down overhead, and the military doesn't do very well at overhead accounts. But the obverse of that also is that if you're so profit and loss oriented, you lose the opportunity to invest in people and develop people, because there's always a cost in people development. One of the things that the military is very good at is personnel development. We have a set system for people to go to school at a certain time. Even if they're in a combat zone, we take them out of the combat zone. If it's time to go to school for a year, we send them outside to Harvard Business School, a whole bunch of other kinds of places. So the P&L piece is very good because it drives accountability at a kind of a overhead level down, and people know whether their project's on time, on schedule, on cost, as opposed to the military that really doesn't care what the cost is because it's not their money.
Okay. Howard, too often I see people who believe that you cannot be caring and have accountability. I know teams need expectations and consequences. Can you talk about the balance?
Yeah, I think when I was sat down there listening to Jack, I wrote the word deterrent, and I think most people know what integrity looks like. So most people know what the right thing to do is, and most groups of people already know how to behave properly in meetings or any situation, in fact. And sometimes if the leader walks in the room who also has integrity and knows what the right thing to do is and kind of insists on it, they only have to insist on it once, and almost instantly everybody goes from having a 3-hour rambling meeting to going round in circles. The same group of people can have a half-hour meeting that's very useful indeed. And I think that the discipline is all there in us anyway. And somebody can just by their very presence change the environment so that all of the right things happen anyways.
Great. Either of you could answer this one. Is it possible to fix a bad leader?
We just shoot him, yeah. You can do that in this country, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. I think the decision you have to make, is it worth the effort? Don't forget, depending on how far up the food chain you go, organizations have a tendency to spend a lot of money coaching people who are, in most cases, behaviorally. It's not a question of professional competence. It's always about behavior, bad behavior. And you spend the money and the person tries hard, but one of the things in my leadership thing says, when no one's looking, do the right thing. Well, the same thing happens frequently with people who are kind of reformed poor leaders. all, because the organization knows by reputation what this person does or doesn't, or fails to do. And so the person goes through this 2 or 3 months of reformed behavior, trying to be a positive leader, and they kind of say, okay, well, maybe it's starting to stick. And then this particular person has a bad day and reverts back to type and model, and the organization said, see? So in most cases, I mean, if this is a young leader, you can put them through training programs, and hopefully they'll get there. But once you get in the military to the 1 or 2 star level, or principal vice president, senior vice president, send them home. It's not worth the risk. The consequences of bad behavior at that level are exponentially. So you're eventually going to fire them anyway. So you get rid of them, you bring in a positive leader in, and that positive leader's got to spend a couple of months turning the organization around, because bad behavior leads to low productivity, low retention rates. People don't want to come there and work there, because out in the street someone says, don't go to Underground Rail, there's an idiot over there, so you don't get the best people. So it's not just the individual, it's a cascading effect that negative leadership has on both the organization, the project, and the reputation of the company.
Howard, I agree with what you said in your talk, but I have no idea whether I'm a strong and caring leader. How do I find out?
Okay, give Nicole a ring, and she'll come and talk to you, and after a while she'll tell you whether she thinks you're a strong and caring leader. How's that? It's a good question. If you can get some feedback from people about the things that you're doing, I think that's the route. That's the route to start. Yeah. We do a kind of a roundabout thing sometimes. I will talk to somebody senior in an organisation, and then somebody else will go in and ask the people a series of questions using those buttons that some of you used yesterday. Yes, the anonymous voting buttons. I think it's worthwhile getting somebody else to run some surveys and find out some stuff. Not necessarily overtly, is this person strong and caring? I think there's definitely an art in asking questions, and there's an art in asking a series of questions so that people warm up to the kinds of answers you want. Because trying to find something out, the number of times we would ask a group of people, a question, I'd say very early on when we're asking people questions, they tell you what they think you want to know, or they tell you what they think they should say, more often than not. So more often than not, the initial responses to questioning are the things that they think they ought to be saying, rather than the truth. And so shaping up to the right questions is a very good thing to do. But if you're concerned about where you are on the strong and caring scale, I think you find somebody that you trust and you ask them to go and find out, or you get Nicole to come along and run some surveys in your organisation, and she can give you the bad news at some point in the future.
That's right. Okay, Jack, I work in an organization where there is very little trust. How can we build it?
One person at a time. This is when I comment about the formal, informal structure. Sometimes the best way to change an organization is through the informal structure, because the informal leadership in that organization is frequently more powerful than the formal structure. And so it starts there. And there is already an element or a nucleus of trust in this informal organization by definition, because they have bound themselves together for a particular reason, either because the person they are working for is not a good leader, or there's an unsafe condition, whatever have you. So you find that organization, and it's pretty easy to tell if you're paying attention to what's going on, and you figure out how you then integrate that informal organization into the formal structure to build trust. And it's done one person at a time. And as I say before, there's boundaries to trust. There are boundaries and there are consequences. And if you don't adhere to those kinds of boundaries, it becomes just a slogan that you stick up on a wall that says, we trust everybody, and that's not true. It just isn't true. So you have to do it one person at a time.
Great. Okay, one last question for both of you. So people in my organization say they don't have time to coach their people. What's your advice?
Go find a new job.
Yeah, I was going to say open a news agency in Wolverhampton, yeah. Same thing.
Yeah.
It's incumbent on anybody here who has a group of people working for them to make sure that they spend time helping them become great at what they do. If you're a leader, your job is to bring out the best in the people that work for you. And people do say that a lot. People do say, I'm way too busy, I don't have time for that kind of thing. But I think also in some organizations, culturally, there's this kind of fake macho thing where you're supposed to say you're really busy because that's, hey, are you busy? Oh, yeah, I'm very busy. Are you busy? Oh, really, really busy. It's a... and what I say to people is when you hear people say, I'm really busy, you should swap busy for disorganized. Because the primary responsibility of a leader is to bring the best out in their people, which is going to require time. And that means time spent talking to them and time spent asking questions and time spent creating that environment where they can deliver their best. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah. One thing, though, that I think we need to be careful of is there are some disciplines that don't do coaching very well.
Yeah.
It is not axiomatic that everybody is a good coach. And disciplines that have a tendency to be internally focused, at whether it's CAD people that just work on their computers, design engineers who work best by themselves, and don't ask their boss to coach them because chances are that person came from the same culture. So somehow or another you need to get a sense of what's going on within that particular division or organization. And then you have to figure out what is it that causes that to take place. And this is again the informal organization, who in that informal organization is in a senior enough position to coach the person about what's acceptable and not acceptable. Because my experience has been is most of the internal people who are very, very good at metallurgy and all those types of disciplines that are real disciplines that require a lot of concentrated thought, that sit behind their computers all day long. They will spend the rest of their life there. They'll never migrate into a management position, or if they move into a management position, they don't know how to lead other people. So you have to figure out where in that organization do I introduce coaching as a skill. And it might be something as simple as putting free coffee on the floor. I did this in London. London engineers are terrible. No reflection, Howard, you came from a different way. But they would come in the morning. You ever been on London Underground? Londoners get on the train, they read the newspaper, they read the book, and they never look at the person next to them. They get off the Underground, they walk up the stairs, they walk into their office, they sit down, they turn the computer on. At the end of the day, they turn the computer off, they pick up the newspaper, get on the train again, and they never talk to anybody. They can go all day long without doing this. So again, somebody gave me the idea. I put a free coffee machine on the engineering floor. First off, it took about 3 days because they all thought it was booby trapped or something like that. I was trying to kill them. And I said, no, it's free coffee. And the head process engineer, a guy named Gordon Snashel, came to me and said, Jack, what are you trying to do? I said, Gordon, I want you guys to talk to each other. That was a 10-minute conversation. Why do you want us to talk to each other? I said, because it's good for your health. It's good for your health, yuck. It took 3 weeks. First day, nobody took any coffee because, again, they thought it was booby-trapped. A week later, 3 people would meet at the coffee machine and have a conversation. By the end of the month, it became kind of a place to go where they would share ideas. Usually it was about football, Manchester or whoever it was, but then they migrated and talking about their job. And then I actually hired a guy who was a plant and put him down there to talk about engineering work. They thought he worked on the floor. He wasn't. He worked for me. And I said, okay, here's the subject for today. And so.
Great. Thank you, guys. That was great, wasn't it?